Okay, we're on our sixth and last video for the workshop session number 1, and this one's focused on our class period, and that period may be the entire hour, the entire hour and a half. It may just be 30 minutes, 20 minutes, but whatever this session is, how do we plan for that session? And of course, we first identify the goals and objectives. We like to list those on the board, list those somewhere in the class where students can see them. So when we're going over objective number 1, it's clear what they're required to be able to do or know from that objective number 1. So make those very clear. First step to the learning process, crystal clear expectations. Now, those objectives must be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. If you're in Quality Matters, you're probably familiar with this because that's what's required for the online courses. Now, Quality Matters in traditional also, so that's exactly why all courses should have a list of objectives, clear expectations for students. So once we have that, students know what objectives we're covering on Monday. They know which ones we're covering on Wednesday. So when they get to class, we start with an introduction. That's our attention getter. Limited or no new terminology. We don't just jump into the lecture, and we sure don't just start off with new terminology, acronyms. What we start with is questions. Great teachers ask great questions. And remember, you're not the answer key. Let them flounder, let them figure it out. And these questions should inspire the curiosity. We can use all kinds of things to help us with this. Videos, problems, demonstrations, stories, analogies. It's going to set the stage for the learning. So we're not trying to get learning here. We're trying to set the stage for learning. We're trying to explain why are we teaching this lesson. If we can't explain why, then the student is not going to sense the relevancy. So when they say, why are we having to do this activity? Why are we having to learn this? And we can't come up with a logical response, they're going to wonder, well, how relevant is this to me? I can remember math classes, it was, they'd always say, well, when we'd ask questions like, well, when are we going to use this? When do we need this? They said, well, you'll need it when you get the next math course. So we get the next math course, we ask the same question, and we get the same answer. So we start wondering, well, when are we really going to use this? So relevancy there. And during this intro, it is imperative we connect this to previous knowledge. That's why we want to know their misconceptions, so we can better connect it. New learning can't occur out of midair. It must connect to old learning. And of course, we have to model that enthusiasm for learning. If you catch yourself saying, well, my students just aren't motivated to learn my subject matter, well, then you need to focus on your motivation to teach the subject matter. Whatever, use the law of mirrors. Whatever you say your students are weak in, ask yourself, what are you doing to get better in that same area? If we're doing group work for this, you would write an objective for your first unit lesson. And in the highest enrollment course simply means it'll have the largest impact on students. And then think about how you'd introduce that objective. Not lecture on it, introduce it. And then go another step further with intentional teaching and Google some videos and pictures that could be used with that objective and copy those in. Sometimes the videos and memes we use may not have anything to do with the actual course content, but they may have everything to do with life. It may have everything to do with getting me to hang on a little longer. It may have everything to do with creating a little humor, because humor and depression are incompatible, cannot exist at the same place and the same time in the brain. So if we can get them laughing to reduce the stress, then that increases learning. So humor has its place also. Kind of ironic though, when we stop learning, so do students. So you'll be amazed at what happens when all of a sudden teachers accept responsibility for constant improvement, constantly evaluating the data and finding better ways and more effective ways to do things. Students do the same. So how do we plan for that class period? We've gone through the introduction, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. But once the introduction is over, we get down to the lesson objective. That part that we don't want to spend any more than 10, 15 minutes max on. So that's our quote unquote lecture. Some of us have provided lecture videos online because we realize, well, our online classes, students can watch those lectures many times they want to. Traditional class, they get it once if they're there and if they're paying attention. Well, that's not anywhere near comparable. And there's a lot of other things about internet versus traditional course that are not comparable. And I think a lot of us are realizing that in the current epidemic we're going through, having to convert our courses. So interjecting those pictures, videos, pictures create a visual in the mind. It makes it easier to remember. It makes it easier to draw back on old learning. So keeping a collection of those for each of your units, you can build these very, very quick. Matter of fact, even a better scenario is challenge your students to come up with these, to come up with pictures, videos, memes, whatever it is. And you can kind of cull off, keep the really good ones, and then you got them for use for next year. If you're having a problem doing that, you may go to your PowerPoint and just find some keywords in that PowerPoint. What I would prefer doing though is doing it in reverse. I like to find a really good picture, really good video, and then try to find something in the slide that's relevant to that. And maybe the meme is on opportunity or encouragement, or find something in the video to connect it to, even if there's not a direct connection. Let's try this video for our screencast-o-matic here. But this could be used in a multitude of courses. What we want students to focus on, what I like before a video to kind of provide some prompts, is I asked them to keep in mind what year is this video, what state is it in, and what's this wind speed that he refers to during the video.
This may be the most extraordinary and frightful event ever captured on film. A 40-mile-per-hour wind whipping and twisting a suspension bridge in Tacoma, Washington. November 7th, 1940. Only 4 months after it was finished, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge dramatically collapses into Puget Sound and into engineering history. Even though it happened half a century ago, this old steel girder bridge is still influencing bridge building and design today.
This is aerodynamics in 3D coming at you right between the eyeballs. You really have to get up, sit up and take notice of this thing.
Okay, you can see from that video, it definitely stimulated some thought. Like, how in the world could that do that? It maybe be a good intro video. We could get into words like resonance. Resonance is although it's a physics term, it also applies to music. It applies to several different areas. You may have experienced it with a washing machine that got out of balance, and the vibrations of that washing machine were in exact sync with each other, so that resonance built up where it kept jumping further and further. And same thing that happened with this bridge. This 40-mile-an-hour wind just happened to be the wind speed that it exactly matched the natural vibration of the bridge. It set up resonance, and rest is on the video. So on this period, we've done an introduction. We went through our lesson body. Now is the key time for learning. Covering content is not where learning occurs. It's where we get familiar with the content. The true and deep learning occurs with what we do with that information. So that's why we're not moving on to more information. Little 10 or 15 minutes, it's time to do an activity. If we don't do this, we're going to move on to new information. We're going to be stacking information they don't know on top of information they don't know, and it doesn't take long to get frustrated in that environment. So stop it. Call it chunking. We're chunking our material into smaller chunks, and we're doing a reflection. This is a guided practice. Sometimes this is used throughout the lecture, but point is, it is student-driven. It is specific activities that not only facilitate the concepts, but also promote the life skills. Good time for you to just kind of circle around the room, check for understanding. In the sciences, we have a period set aside that's our lab period. But what a lot of courses are doing is they're just incorporating that lab within the lecture so that they can use this reflection as a time, quote unquote, to do the lab. I've had some other courses say, well, we don't have that advantage. We don't have labs in our courses. A lab is simply an active learning activity. Any course, every course should have labs, quote unquote. Every course should have active learning activities. There may not be a lab period set up for that, but that's why we're going over the 4 parts of the class period. So it allows you to kind of circulate around the room, check for understanding, check their notes. And then the last part is the actual assessment. This is where they check for their understanding independently. They're not working in groups anymore. The guided practice may have been in groups, but the assessment needs to know, all right, what do I need to know? Then I can understand my shortcomings, identify misconceptions. This could be done in a multitude of formats. Doesn't always have to be a quiz. Be a writing assignment, could just be a short answer discussion. And these are really short also. And we're talking 5 minutes on the assessment. So the intro and the assessment, very short. It's just like Don Dewey says. You say we don't learn from experience. You say, well, sometimes we do. Well, we learn when we reflect on that experience. Sometimes we're going through something so stressful that we don't even have time to learn. We're so stressed out. We're just trying to survive. So how can I learn from that? Now, a month down the road, when the stress has subsided, I can reflect back on that experience, and that's where the learning comes. So that's what we're saying for the classes. If we don't stop and take time to intentionally incorporate this, then we're shortchanging our student on learning. Took this picture at McDonald's a couple of years ago. There's some things they pointed out. They wanted a customer-focused folks. They wanted them to consistently show up on time. I guess they need to add that word because you can just see them talking to an employee saying, well, you got to be here on time. And they say, well, I am most of the time. So they had to add the word consistently. I'm wondering how many of those employees know what customer focused is. Now we're talking McDonald's in this case. If this same slide was for Chick-fil-A, there'd be no doubt they understood what customer focused was. Most other fast foods may be questionable though, and especially when you say things like professional in appearance and behavior. How in the world is somebody going to describe that one? I looked at one of the code of conducts in the college's books, and it said under language, it said only appropriate a language allowed. And I wondered who's going to explain appropriate? Who's going to provide that definition? Because many times it's hard to explain what something is, but we can very clearly explain what it's not. And I had the task of explaining that to every orientation group that came through our college. And the way we answered was really the same. It's not important as to what the specifics are. It's important that there are boundaries. There are guidelines, and those guidelines may not be the same as your culture of origin, but we're trying to prepare you for a culture in the workplace or higher education. And there's a certain behaviors and appearances that are appropriate for those that may or may not be appropriate in your culture of origin. So different rules. A basketball court does not have the same rules as a football field. We know to change our behavior when we walk on a different playing field, different venue. So that's the main point. So we're talking to orientation students. This is really simple. We say, let's focus on what's definitely not appropriate. GD and MF and a tone of voice where people can hear it around you is not appropriate for an institution of higher learning, period. Now, somebody may say, well, what about this word? What about that word? You're trying to get into gray area stuff. The point is there are boundaries. That's the main thing. And you can read that to yourself. I'm sure based on that phone number, somebody just made this up jokingly, but it has a lot of truth to it. So we ask, why do we have to be able to adapt and improvise? Why is it always something? Why am I constantly adjusting things? And this says it all. So how does it apply to classroom teaching? How can we reduce the stress associated with this? Being proactive. Okay, not wait until we must do it or required to do it, but do it because it's the right thing to do. And then don't get caught behind the curve. Kind of like Mike Tyson used to say, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. So adapting and improvise is the name of our game. That is it. You want to be a professional educator, this is the name of the game. So since student names are one of the top strategies for promoting relationships in class, what intentional system do you have for using all student names each class period? Because when we ask faculty, they say, yes, using student names, that's really important. Well, if it's important, then is it important for all students? Or is it just important for some of them? So in other words, do I have an intentional system for using all student names during the class period? Used to show this one in class. I really can't even remember where I took the picture from, but it just seemed to kind of put things in perspective for students, comparing the habits of successful and unsuccessful people. And that's how we present it. We change our habits, we change our behavior, we change which category we fall in. But you'll also notice the big one for us, especially talking about constant improvement, is that Because let's face it, constant improvement means constant change. And this is just an example of intentionally interjecting life lessons into the course. And when you do that, the response from students will be they get much more out of that sometimes than they do any of the course content. Sometimes it's just simple quotes that make the biggest impact. Want something you never had, got to be willing to do something you've never done. And that humor helps also. Helps keep students engaged, keeps the stress level down. Anytime the stress level drops, learning opportunity goes up. We had a school closing announcement a couple of years ago, and students read this on the LMS. But what it didn't say was the last sentence. If all we read was the first part of that sentence, due to inclement weather, all campuses will be closed. You know, what do students say when they see something like this? Woo, no classes, no school. What do faculty say? Woo, no classes, no school. I mean, we automatically we don't have to do this. So you notice this one's worded a little different. All learning will be redirected to the online. It didn't say anything about we're going to shut down learning. We're just redirecting it to the online classroom. Oh, I had another one. So as usual, use your course calendar to proceed. Find the objective in the textbook, locate it in the textbook, and then watch the video that goes with that objective. That order is important. Finding the objective in the textbook is probably going to create a lot of questions because most students aren't real good with reading textbooks and understanding what they read. And that's why they say they don't read them. They don't understand the whole point is to get those questions in your mind. Locate the objective, that's probably going to create some questions, and then watch the lecture video that goes with that objective. And for those with limited internet access, you could put it on jump drive, DVD. The questions, what are you doing in response to that? And then the last thing, we have to have an assessment. We have to have some sort of accountability. So we throw that in. That way we know they've watched the videos, they've completed the assignments. Some folks just may not be as good with humor. You know, that's what some folks say. Well, I'm not good with humor. Well, you don't have to be. I mean, you ever go on the internet? There's all kind of funny folks. Well, you can find thousands of things on the internet. Let that do the work for you. You don't have to invent this stuff. Now, obviously, this says that these were actual comments from teachers in the New York City public school system. And it did say all teachers were reprimanded because it is. I would hope so. I mean, if this was actually sent out to parents, I mean, you can pause this to read some of these. We're not going to spend any time on it, but might get a chuckle out of them. But I'd hate to know these were sent to parents. Although sometimes it might be what we want to say. So once again, our responsibility, every employee's responsibility in the community college system, is to inspire and facilitate learning. So we'll try another video here of why prior practice increases confidence.
Experimenting with fireworks for Halloween, and I think I've perfected with sulfur, and I'm using some potassium magnesium. So I'm going to light this, and it should just sparkle a little bit.
As a chemist, I can appreciate this video a little more than some.
Actually, I think I'll turn the light out.
But he probably should have practiced this before demonstrating it, especially if it was in front of a class.
Let's try this out. Holy smokes.
Henry Ford said, if everyone's moving forward, then success takes care of itself. That's our whole point here. If I want better students in my class, then I want to know the classes they've been to before me are promoting the same values and behaviors that are expected in the workplace. Time they get to me, they're a better student. Sometimes we call that the 369. If the person to my left, to my right, and to my rear is covering their area, then I can focus dead forward. I can focus my attention straight forward because I know the sides and backs are taken care of. And it's the same way in education. If we know the folks around us are doing their job, then we can focus just on doing ours. It brings a question: why should some folks be allowed to opt out of constant improvement? If that's a foundational requirement of all accrediting agencies, why should someone be able to opt out of constant improvement and be a threat to the accreditation of the college? Not only undermine learning, but also be a threat to the accreditation. This is another good video about teachers.
And you know why we care about great? Because we're in education. See, I love it when the clerk at Walmart is nice to me. That means a great deal to me. I love it. But my kids' teachers had better be nice to them because it's so much more important. And we knew that when we chose education. What is it great teachers do differently? One thing great teachers do differently is they understand it is people, it's not programs. Do you all know if you have great teachers, you have a great school? And do you know if you don't have great teachers, you don't have a great school? And nothing else is ever going to determine that? But isn't that funny how we think programs are the problem or programs are the solution? People are the problem and people are the solution. People are always going to be the problem and people are always going to be the solution. Do you know why programs come and go in education so much? Because whatever the new program is, the crummy people can't do that one either. That's the reason. You tell me what on earth program you're going to bring in that's going to fix the worst teacher you've ever known. There's no chance in the world it's going to do it. But you know what happens when we bring a new program is? The very best teachers get invested in it. They start to believe in it. They start to bring it in their classroom. Ineffective people can't do it, so you know what happens? They now yank the program out and tear the scabs off the good people. It's like block scheduling at the high school. What's your choice? Do you want an ineffective teacher every day for 50 minutes, or do you want the ineffective teacher every other day for 90 minutes? And we're going, block scheduling didn't seem to work. I don't see what the problem is there. It's the most amazing thing.
And although that was more geared towards K-12, you see the point he was making. It's people, not programs, that'll make it work. So just reminding ourselves of these things. And once again, I know you read through these things, you say, well, I already do these. Well, if you already do them, how can you do them more intentionally? And then the second question, how can you help your colleagues do them more intentionally? Now, we'll go back to that one word. We've chosen that word. That's our one word for ILA. Everything we do, the one word it focuses on our culture is respect. Everything we do is with that word in mind, and we'll talk more about it as we go through the sessions. The 5 strategies that we'll be using for course redesign. Once again, we're not going to spend time elaborating. Our second session is devoted entirely to this, but we wanted to go ahead and prep you for it because you may have already have many of these. I hope most of you already have unit objectives for every unit and every course you teach. If not, we need to get those constructed. But we also need to evaluate the ones we have if we have them. See if we can note the ones that are essential and maybe note those that are not so essential. We use course evals to actually improve the positive learning environment. In other words, improve perceptions of students, not just throw them in a box somewhere and never do anything with them. Lecture videos, a lot of you may already have those or are working on them now, especially with our current crisis, and frequent low stakes assessments. These are assessments for learning, not assessments of learning like say your Unit 1 exam is going to be. These are the little frequent assessments. And then, of course, if we're doing those, it'll be much easier to provide interventions because we'll know who's needing the intervention. And those are the core components of the course redesign. And once again, with these in place in your course, whatever you decide to do, whatever activities you use, assessments you use, they will be enhanced because of these. The students will feel more in control. They'll have access 24/7 to the course material. So it changes the game when it comes to instruction by having these available 24/7. And that completes our video. We'll talk more in our Zoom session for session number 1. Until then, you have a good weekend.